I met a gypsy.
What do you think of MotoGP from a fan's perspective now? Like, where do you like where the sport's going? What do you think they should change? Like, where are you at with it?
The wings and the aerodynamic part of it, I haven't been on board with it as much, just because it's tightened the passing zones down a lot more, where there's some corners, there's some big passing corners, and then there's some where you could use to sneak by and just, if you're setting something up, whatever. And then the way the downforce is working, it's shortening those zones up. So it's just making a lot of passing harder, in that way. It's also whoever's obviously hitting the aerodynamics the hardest and the best is obviously Ducati, and they're in a different place. And then kind of even looking at the sprint races, I'm looking at it from a rider standpoint first, and it's, the way those tires work and the rigidity of those bikes that, in the first 2 laps, they're pretty difficult to ride at speed, getting into, and you can have a lot of like little front lockups like Marquez in Portugal when he was following, and he had to let off the brake, let it straighten out, but then he got into somebody. And you have these sprint races that are short races, and so much is just decided on the first 2 laps when it's the sketchiest to ride the bike at, that pace. So, but it has brought some good racing, but it's brought, some crashes and injuries too. And the guys are racing like 44 races a year when you look at the sprints, because I think they're doing 22 weekends.
I think it is 40. Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, so it's 44. Yeah, and it's a lot. And, I'm a fan of the racing for sure, but the aerodynamics and the ride height devices and all that stuff, you're going faster, and then technology's there, but sometimes it affects the racing, and that's where I've just always said that for the fans really don't care about a lap time or a lap record. They want to see good racing. And sometimes you can see the best racing like when you're on rain tires and the track starts drying. Yeah. And there's just a limit. But the limit is where...
But it's who's finding the limit and how are they finding the limit?
Well, the way I look at it, too, is it's like the tire can be a little bit more the deciding factor, where if you've got a lower performing tire that's still safe, I mean, it's going to go race distance, all that stuff, it's a little bit lower level, all the bikes can get to that level. Where in the past with GP, there's been like 1 or 2 manufacturers that basically hit the nail on the head with that tire. Other people, their bike just doesn't work as good on it, and they suffer the whole year. Where if they sit there and came in, and it's kind of like World Superbike with the Pirellis, and it's not that they're a bad tire at all, but they have a tire that pretty much all the manufacturers can kind of get to
they can extract the time out of that tire.
Yeah, and the fast guys, the guys that win, are still going to win, but the race is going to be closer. There's going to be more passes and bigger passing zones. And I just look at it from a racing standpoint, on that. And that's where MotoGP is going so much in the other direction of aerodynamics. And like I said, the anti-wheelie, where the bike's lower and then it makes the wheelbase super long so it doesn't wheelie, and you're able to use all the power. And it's a lot of cool stuff, but, is the racing any better? And it's just a lot more money when, if anything, in the future, maybe some of that stuff gets pulled off, because they got to slow the guys down too. Now that they're doing 360 Ks an hour at Mugello, you just can't be, because again, just from a rider, I know that when you go into turn 1, you're going over that rise and the bike's kind of wheeling right there. So everything's topped out, in the suspension. And then you're going into a big braking zone. If you're the 3rd or 4th rider in line, and everybody's just kind of spread out, doing their thing after they've been single file on the straightaway, if you don't brake before they do, you're in a real world of trouble, because everything starts buffeting. You're getting sucked in, so you're just not able to hold max brake pressure. And then you start running up in there. And if you're, the 4th rider in line, there's nowhere to go. And Alex Marquez had that happen at Mugello, and he threaded the needle. And it was just like, basically you could see it happening, and he was coming in there, and then he saw that gap, and he just kind of let off everything to get through it, basically to clear himself, because if he kept trying to stop, he was going to think he was going to take Mark out. I think that's who it was. But he got in there and he got through him, and then he could run wide, and they kind of passed him. But for that, there was like about 70 meters of a section. It was super dicey. And I saw the whole thing, and I was like, oh my God. And they're just going so fast now, and it's not about the top speed or the lap record for me. It's about the racing, So I just hope that, for the future, that they look at everything, because for a long time they were trying to make racing tighter. And that's when they went back to 800s, and then they went to a spec ECU where everybody had to use the same thing. But I kind of would say every time, well, it's like if you just bring a tire that's just a little bit lower level, not a bunch, but just a little bit, you're not having to make all these crazy R&D changing that costs so much money. So much money for the factories, because, they're racing thousands and they go back to 800s. Then they go back to thousands. And then you got the aerodynamics. So just that engine change in those years, like the millions of dollars that the teams had to spend to do that, and trying to accomplish the same thing that if they just brought a tire that was 15% lower level as like single outright lap time, it lasted the whole race and it was fine. It just didn't have that super high level. You would achieve the same thing.
Yeah.
Because the tire at the end of the day, that's one of the most deciding, factors. And if you're making a tire that's just unbelievable, you're trying to make the bike that can stay with that tire or make it work the best, where that's one of the bigger issues.
Yeah. And then what about the electronic stuff? Like, do you think that, because the problem is, like, it's amazing when it works, but then as soon as it doesn't work, it's just a complete disaster, Yeah,
I mean, I've never had much good things to say about just all the electronics, because it's, it's something I kind of struggled with a little bit too, but it's part of it. I get it. It's getting transferred to the street. It works, in a great way, but it's really sophisticated. They've kind of went backwards a little bit in a couple spots, but I remember there's a year that, if your bike knows it's going to run out of gas, it'll basically go into an auto lean mode to make it to the finish. Or if it, it was adjusting basically. And I did not like that. But that was kind of, the electronics are, a big factor in racing. I mean, you're spending probably more time looking at the data on the electronic side than you're looking at with the geometry of the bike, because the bikes are pretty close, pretty set up and dialed when you get to the track. So the amount of time that it's just the computer, and those little bitty things is a lot, and I mean, it's not a bad thing. It's just, it's sometimes I think it's getting a little bit heavy, with the electronics. I mean, you never see a guy coming out of a corner sideways,
no,
and that's fun to watch, just a little. It doesn't have to be like old school where you got smoke coming off the tire, but the bikes
we would appreciate that.
Yeah, the bikes just don't get upset or move around as much as they used to.
Yeah. I know there was a case this year with Millsy where his bike was just lost. Thought he was on a different part of the track.
Oh yeah.
So like obviously the ECU basically changes corner to corner as to what engine braking.
So he thought a certain level of traction control was going to be in it, and it wasn't.
Well, and just like the engine braking coming in to, obviously they'll like have max engine braking coming off one of the straights, and then like basically no engine braking through certain sections.
Yeah.
And so the bike was basically in a different turn in the computer than what it was on the track, and then it's just 100% power through like the tight chicane where like they're only delivering a small percentage, and the thing was just like, I got to get off the track.
Yeah.
And like when you get to a point where your bike glitches, then it's like you can't even ride it at all. And I think about like Pecco's crash, recently, like turn 2.
Yeah.
Just dude gets the whole shot. There's chaos going on behind him, and then like by himself in the
he's really lucky that and it sucks that the guys crashed in turn 1.
Oh, he's
so lucky that happened, because he would have had 2 other dudes breathing down him, and it's just, that was scary. Yeah, and it's kind of, I think some of the things have gotten better, but it's just it's tough, because the electronics can sometimes put you in a position that you don't want to be in, and you can't get out of it, because that's what, like if you're going through a turn and you go to lose the front and you're already at max lean angle, kind of max grip for the bike, you try to pick it up with the throttle, try to pick the front up. The bike's not going to give you all that power
because of the lean angle.
So you can kind of be stuck in that position
with nowhere to go.
Yeah, and is kind of similar, looking back at the Simoncelli, accident. When that kind of started happening, I was commentating because I'd had a concussion from the week before. So I was watching that happen live.
No way.
And, I was supposed to be in the race. And, he's going through the corner, he loses front. And, and whatever happened, but I just know how the bikes are at that point, where if you lose the front and you try to get on the throttle, you can either, if you didn't have all the electronics, you either plow through the front and you crash, or it sometimes would high side you. But at least one of the two, you're trying to get it out of that moment where, he was kind of stuck just plowing the front, and he just drove back across the track because he couldn't get the bike picked up. So those little things, and again, it might not be everything that's what went on, but definitely sometimes the electronics can put you in that position where you're asking for it, you're needing it, but it's because of not breaking the tire loose, it's not going to give it to you. So that's kind of my issue with the electronics in general, but it's 2023. I get it. You have development and all that kind of stuff, but they're so high. And we always say that, the bikes are at a high level, but these guys don't have roll cages around them and they don't have seat belts. And when you look at the difference from Wayne Rainey on a 500 and Kevin Swantz in the early 90s, and everybody said it was so crazy fast, and now they're doing the speeds they're doing now, it's like, when's enough going to be enough?
We're excited to announce the launch of our new membership site, gypsytales.com, packed with exclusive content and perks that you won't find anywhere else. This is your chance to become a part of the Gypsy Gang. And as a special bonus, if you sign up to an annual membership, you'll be entered into the draw to win our custom-built TC125. Gypsy Gang.